Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nightcap, the show that asks, where'd that come from? In this show, we ask creators about themselves, about their games, and what influences their game's journey. Tonight's show is brought to you by The Shivers, the mystery pop-up game now on Kickstarter, and Role Player Adventures by Thunderwork Games, where your choices alter the fate of the kingdom, also available on Kickstarter. If you'd like to sponsor a future show, please let us know. We'd love to have you. As for the show, our co-hosts are Jacob Ponatowski from Board Games and Bourbon and Will Gibson from the Dairy Isle. I'm Glenn Flaherty, and tonight's guest is Travis Jones, designer of Pendulum, the new Stonemaier game that looks pretty and has a timer. So, without further ado, please welcome Travis Jones. Travis, thank you so much for being here from your San Francisco basement.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Yes. Apologies for the technical difficulties. But...
Oh, no worries, man. I'm really honored that you came on, because I know, the game just broke and the timing really worked out. Now, I do want to talk about Pendulum first and kind of what went into making it. What was the process like? What were your inspirations? I do have a little snippet here from Stonemaier on describing the game, and then I'll have you, take it further. It says here, in Pendulum, each player is a powerful, unique noble vying to succeed the timeless king as the true ruler of Dunya. Is that correct, Dunya?
Dunya, I think.
Dunya, okay, because Dunya is the neighboring city to Nunya, but Dunya is much cooler. Players command their workers, execute stratagems, which is kind of like schemes, and expand the provinces and their domain in real time to gain resources and move up the 4 victory tracks: power, prestige, popularity, and legendary achievement. Players must use actual time, which I think is very cool, and I want to talk about that point. Players must use actual time as a resource in managing their strategy to best their opponents, using time on different action types and balancing it with time spent planning and analyzing. The winner will be the player who manages and invests their time most effectively and who builds the best engine, not the player who acts the quickest. Pendulum is the highest rated prototype in the history of Stonemaier Games Design Day. Woo, look at you, Mr. Fancy Pants. If you enjoy Token and Seven Wonders, we think you'll enjoy Pendulum. So with that as a description, can you kind of tell us, just in your words, what it is about, the vision, you're kind of the whole thing.
Sure. Well, I guess it's a pretty good description of the game there. Although I guess the devil's in the details about exactly how the game works, because I know and we've already seen that in the reaction with things being released.
Right. And how many players is it, by the way? Players and time?
It's 1 through 5.
Okay, right on. So a solo mode.
There's a solo mode with Automa Factory, and it can go up to 5 players. The time is 60 to 90 minutes. And the good thing about the time is it doesn't really change that much based on the number of players, because you play it in real time. When you add more players, you're not necessarily increasing the time very much. There are some untimed phases where
predictability to me is so important. When games go 3 or 5 hours, oh my goodness me. So the fact that you know what it is fantastic.
Yeah, this game will not go that long. You would have to work really hard to make this game go that long.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay. There are untimed portions where there is a little bit of decision making. Most of the action, I guess, is in a portion that is measured in real time. But there are some untimed parts where you can take breaks, and like I said, there's a few decisions to be made there. But you would have to work really hard to make the game take 3 or 4 hours.
And what are the decision points like in the game that you're dealing with?
Sure. I guess this goes into maybe with a more general description of the game, because like I mentioned, it's kind of hard to describe the flow and the feel of it. Hopefully it really is something very different. That's a lot of the feedback that we've gotten on the game, and that I was going for was to try to actually make something that would be really different and kind of unique.
Did you test play it for a long time?
Yes, for a very long time. Because it's so different and so weird, it took a long time to get it right. And
how long was that?
Where it would be playable. So it's about 5 years from when I got the idea to when it's coming out now.
Solid.
Yeah, I mean, the real-time space, there's certainly some, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of interesting games out there that explore the real-time space. I don't think I'm some, brilliant, innovative genius that thought of putting time on a game. That's out there,
I'm glad you clarified.
Just in case anyone thought I was a genius. Let's be clear. I'm just a guy who drinks bourbon. But
you're in the right place then.
That's what I thought. I just made the game to hopefully get on the show one day so that I could drink bourbon with some other people.
I liked you from the minute I met you, and I knew. All right, sorry, continue.
No, but so to try to describe the flow of the game and sort of what the decision points are like. And I know you all may not be as familiar with the game. We're recording this right now before all the information is unveiled, I guess.
Right.
So while it's in real time, what you'll definitely see that we talk a lot about trying to describe the game to everyone is that it's not like a race where you're trying to beat a clock. A lot of other real-time games out there, they introduce some interesting decisions, but there's a lot of time pressure. There's always a moment at which some timer, whether it's electronic or sand timer, is about to run out. And if you don't do something, then you're just wasting time. And you feel the stress that the time's about to run out, and you've got to act now, the time's up, and that's the moment where you decide and you do something, right? Which, don't get me wrong, as I said, it can be a rush, and it's a great experience. There's lots of interesting games out there.
One of my least favorite mechanics, I got to tell you, by the way, that pressure, that kind of pressure, always befuddles me. Yeah,
and I don't like it all that much myself either. Like I said, there's some real-time games that I do enjoy, but it's definitely a different experience. And so the idea that came to me was, when I sort of dreamed up the game, was absolutely had nothing to do with that sort of rush to beat the clock. I wanted to try to create something that would be at a very comfortable pace where you're making decisions, but nonetheless, those decisions are made in real time. So there's no turns where you're waiting on someone else to go. You're taking actions simultaneously with other players around the board. You're never waiting on anyone else to take their turn. All the game is happening in real time, but there's not like a specific clock on you that you're racing against. So
when you say that players are taking time simultaneously, what are the different actions that everyone might be taking at the same time?
Yeah, so the heart of the game is really a worker placement game. So there's action spaces out on the board, and there's timers that there's sort of 3 different areas of action spaces, and there's a timer for each area, and there are different lengths of time. So you've got 45 seconds, 2 minutes, and 3 minutes. So there's different measures of time that you are basically putting a worker down and locking up that worker for that amount of time when you go to an action in that area. So that's where the timed element comes in, but then there's different benefits for each of those actions. And the actions in the shortest area, the 45-second timer, the benefits you're going to get are a lot less than the actions you're getting elsewhere. So there's a thought process around, just the strategy of your game and what you need. I mean, there's different resources, and you may say, I really need military, I really need to go get culture to get some of these victory points. So there's the traditional sort of worker placement, engine building aspect of the game. But then there's also the time as a trade-off too. So you could say, well, I really want to get I need some power victory points because I'm really behind there. I could go here for 2 minutes and get myself 1 power and a couple votes. Or I could go over here and fire my much larger engine that'll give me 3 victory points, power victory points. But I'm going to lock myself up for 3 minutes. And so you have a choice there where it's combining things, what you think about in terms of the worker action, but it's combining that with a choice around the time. And the idea is there to create a different experience where, so there's different things you can consider. One, there's the opportunity cost that, hey, I'm putting my worker here for 3 minutes. But there's also this interesting aspect that I found just playing the game and from other people, where you're trying to sort of balance your own stress level and ability and your freedom to think, and you actually have control over that in this game. In other games, where you have your sand timer as a worker, I flip it over on a spot, I've got 1 minute, as soon as that's up, I've got to make a decision, I've got to flip it somewhere else. Here I could make a choice. I could say, I've got a lot of things going on, I'm not sure what I want to do. If I put my worker here on this 45-second spot, I think I maybe want that resource, but I'm going to have to figure out 45 seconds later what I would do with that worker again. But I think I need some of these resources on the 3-minute spot. Why don't I put it there and effectively buy myself more time to think? So you're like managing the mental load is an aspect of the game. So you're kind of buying and trading time, both within the worker's actions, but also within your own mental space of, let me put on a longer action just so I have more time to think through my strategy now, or I know exactly what I'm doing. I want the flexibility for this worker to be free, and so I'm going to put him on the shorter spot.
Now, when you're mentioning that, 2 things come to mind. One if you're all doing it simultaneously and you're really focused on your time and your spot, I guess in a way that makes it really hard to pit yourself against another person, because you're so focused on doing your thing. It's hard to both do your thing and plot against the other person. And also, what is the player interaction? So I guess there's like, kind of like Euro, like spot blocking and stuff like that, maybe?
Yeah. So the worker placement aspect brings in the main level of interaction, which is that there are spots on the boards, a number of spots, usually the more desirable spots, where if any other workers there, you can't go. So there's a blocking aspect, which also brings in this interesting element of time too, where you may need to commit a worker to an action for even a longer amount of time just because you want to claim the space. And so it's again a question of how much that time is worth to you to commit. So there's the player interaction there. To your point, you can't quite focus on another player's strategy in real time. So the interaction is more just sort of naturally evolves from people stealing spots, and you maybe get a sense of the spots that are more popular, even if you're not staring at someone else's board. But I agree that was an interesting part of the design journey. Is initially the game was all real time because I had this crazy idea and I thought it was interesting to explore, and so I ran with it, and I was like, well, it should be all simultaneous in real time, so let's just make the game like that. And you'd sit down and you would play for something like 45 minutes or an hour straight with no breaks, just playing this worker placement strategy game, which was pure chaos and hilarious. And I have one friend who actually loved that version of the game, and he's like, oh, you made it so much less stressful, and people get breaks.
There's always that friend who adds that encouragement by pooping on your further developments.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
like it's interesting. When you're talking about like pitting against each other in that worker placement, so I'm to assume that there is a common board, and then everyone kind of has like their own little tableau in front of them.
Exactly. All the action spaces are on a common board, so the timers are all shared. It's not like I have my own 2-minute, 3-minute timer. It's all common timers that are shared. And then action spaces that are shared. So that's where you can block one another, and you get that kind of level of interaction. There's also some interaction where there's just one piece of the game that is sort of a race during each round. You have a vote resource, and like I said, there's these breaks. So you sort of play around in the real time, and then as you mentioned in the description, you're all nobles trying to succeed the emperor that has vacated power in this empire, but you're still trying to run the empire as you vie against each other. So you have a round of real time, and then you have a break where you call council, and everyone goes to the council phase, and that is where you tally up votes that you have acquired. Is one of a few resources, and whoever has the most votes will become the first in imperial privilege order, and so they will get the first choice of a goodie during the council phase to claim a reward for themselves. And it also creates this interesting mechanism during the real-time portion of the game where if you ever have a moment where you both try to put a worker in the same spot, and you want to argue about, no, I got there first, no, you did. We sort of built in the rules that it's not about hair trigger reflexes. If you get there roughly the same time, we recommend just the second grace period, so you don't have people frantically running around the board. If you get there about the same time and you have a conflict, then instead of devolving into a fight, you look at the imperial privilege track, and so whoever is higher in privilege order will be able to break that tie. So that's another interesting way where we try to price in the time aspect. So if you don't like the stress of someone taking your spot, then maybe you go for votes and you put yourself top in the order, and then you don't have to worry about that as much. So it's a way to kind of self-select. I'm stressed out about this part of the game, or I enjoy this part, and you can sort of buy into the part that you like best and sort of like, take the play style that you enjoy, which I guess that's true for all games. I usually have a strategy that just seems more fun to me or more appealing for whatever reason.
Much more civilized than Pistols at Dawn.
Yeah, exactly. So we want to try to build that into the game, though, because that's what I don't see in a lot of real-time games is, can I make a strategic choice to manage time differently than you do?
That's pretty cool.
Game. And so that's the idea.
Yeah, so you get to invest in your preferred kind of decisions. That's really rad.
Yeah,
Jacob, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I had just a question. First off, with the way the game seems to work, it mirrors some of the like mobile games that you see at times that have like the like click and wait kind of thing. Was that like any kind of like inspiration, or is that something that you thought about? Like,
it was not. No, I haven't played many of those games. No.
I have a friend of mine who absolutely loves those, and as soon as you started talking about how this game, he also loves Euro games, and I'm like, this is going to be the perfect game for him. But
Yeah.
my other question was related to the this whole like imperial the track for like the imperial favor that you were talking about, or like the order. Is
Yeah.
you mentioned that's the person who breaks ties? Is it based on order, or is it based on the person who's there on top is the one who breaks the tie? Or like says
sure.
like that this like there's a tie
Oh
between
yeah,
me and
no.
Glenn.
It's
Okay.
only whoever is involved in it. I see what you're saying. No, it's not like
Yeah.
you defer to the king or the first place to say break our tie. Oh, great one. Who do you choose? it's whoever's involved in the conflict, because you do the votes and you rank everybody in a space, kind of like turn order in a traditional.
Okay.
game.
Yeah.
So every player has a spot based on your votes, first to last. And so if second and third both try to put somewhere, then the second place would break the tie, and they would claim the privilege. Although an interesting thing I would note, like I said, I hope that it meets the design goals, which is that you're never racing. Or let me say, it's rare that you're racing for a spot. I mean, there are times that the timer initially gets flipped and an action space comes open that you may have one juicy spot that a few people are really gunning for at that time that is a shared space. So it's not that it never happens there's conflict, but it's actually really rare. Like I thought of the privilege idea very early in the design process. And then I went through playtesting, developing the game, and I was like, "Wow, this thing just never gets used." And I mean, I didn't see it as a bad thing.
That must feel great when you have an idea that seems so fresh.
I mean, I think it was both exciting and terrifying because you don't know if your idea is fresh or just stupid.
Right.
But I agree. It was very cool to be working on something that was so different. I mean, I take this to playtest meetups or prototype conventions, and I always consistently got feedback of like, this is different. This is new.
That's awesome.
I love games. I've played every game out there, but this is something I haven't experienced before. And that was like, the drug that got me into it. Because I never, when I first came up with this, I never was sort of sitting around like, oh, I really want to be a board game designer. What should I go do? It was more literally this idea for this crazy way to do a real-time game that would be very different, hopefully, from other real-time games. And
I think inspiration is really the only way to kind of go about it. You need that spark, and that's what really drives it. Will, did you have a question you wanted to ask there?
Well, no, I just wanted to point out how I like how circumspect you were about the concept of using a timer, knowing every issue.
Yes.
And just nipping it in the bud.
Yes, there was
every
a lot.
Complaint people could have about having a timed element to the game.
Did you go through all those issues as you were playtesting?
Oh yeah. There were so many issues I had to go through. First version, you had the final version does still have cards. There's these cards you can play that help fill the time in between your worker actions, and that's another place where you can kind of select how much sort of mental bandwidth you want to get involved in, because you can choose rewards that put more cards in your hand.
Yeah.
But that's going to give you more decisions to make later in the game in the real time. Or you can take a card that's just an instant one time, hey, get all this good stuff, and you don't add cards to your hand. So that's another way you can sort of choose, I want more, mental load in this game because I enjoy it, or I'd rather not. And ideally the choice is just as effective for winning the game. It's just whether you prefer to think more or less during the real-time phase.
And over the course of the game, the decision tree, does it start tight and it grows more robust, or does it become tighter on everyone as the game goes on? Like, do you gain workers in it at all and it becomes more of a tight, or how does that work?
Yes, you do gain workers, which is another place we tried to put in some sort of, again, some self-selection of how much craziness do I want. I shouldn't say craziness. I enjoy the game. That's why I made it. Of just of how much more decisions do I want to make in the real time, more or less. Yeah. So workers cost you a lot of resources, but if you enjoy making those decisions, then get another one. You might be able to use it effectively. Even I, who made the game personally, like, you start the game with 2 workers and you can get a max of 4. And even I am on the fence of whether the 4th worker is worth it to me, because it's more to think about. And I have some players who love it and always go for the 4th worker, and I have others who don't. And I've still, friends that I've played with have still won the game without maxing out their workers, because the 4th can be a bit of a distraction.
When you play with other people, how often do you win your own game?
That's an interesting choice. Interesting question that you could ask any designer. I definitely, I would say I win more when I'm trying really hard, but I find myself often when I'm playtesting trying little squirrely strategies or different corner cases, and specifically seeing like, is this underpowered, or is this, would this make sense if I did that? So I feel like I don't actually win the majority of the time necessarily.
And would you say that paths to victory, there's a multitude?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I wanted to put into the game. Like I said, I think there's different paths with sort of the mental load you want and how much real-time decision making you want to make. There you can go lean or heavy there. But then there's also absolutely some different thematic engines that you get into in the game, and the game actually has asymmetric characters. So you have different characters that sort of push you into some of those strategies. So, for example, there's different victory point tracks, and each character has different length tracks. So you may have more power that you need to win, or popularity, or prestige, and then those victory point tracks kind of tie into different engines in the game. So the card engine that I mentioned is generally more effective at getting you popularity victory point tracks. So you may want to go further into that engine if you have that track longer. And then the military provinces is a different strategy, and that usually helps you get power.
So those are the colored cards, because I noticed Jamie told me to use the pictures on the website. It wasn't listed, but when I tried to get the pictures for this interview, I noticed they were labeled commerce, government, influence, military.
Yeah.
They're actually labeled. So, okay. And so again, what do all those different things do?
Yeah. You rattled them off pretty well there. There's kind of this thematic kind of through lines in the game that tie between the victory tracks and the resources. So, for example, there is a red victory track for power, and there's a red resource in the game called military. There's a blue victory track called prestige, and a blue resource called culture, and then a yellow victory track called popularity, and a yellow resource called gold. Or commerce. So each of those resources is not 100% exactly tied. They sort of blend into different mechanisms in the game. It's not just like, oh, here's you go to this action, you convert 3 gold cubes into 3 yellow victory points. It's kind of different mechanisms. Like I said, the blue plays into the cards. They help you refresh your cards more, and the cards get you the blue victory points. The red help you conquer provinces. The provinces help you get red victory points. And yellow help you take the worker actions, more of the worker actions, and the worker actions are a faster way to get you yellow victory points. So there's kind of these different themes, resource and victory point wise, that then tie into different parts of the game, different engines within the game, to help kind of guide you to those different aspects. But everyone has to use all of it. That was something I always wanted to do. I found early on in real-time game, people can very much get this kind of laser focus, because when you have time pressure, it's easy to just sort of pick something and say, oh, I understand how this works, let me just do it. And I wanted to make sure that people were challenged to engage with the different parts of the game. But of course, the different parts had to be very simple and intuitive. You cannot have a lot of superfluous stuff. So it's it's each of its mini games are very streamlined and simple, but you got to juggle them all. No matter which character you have, you're going to have to get some victory points on each.
So definitely intuitive, which is great. And what you're saying is you don't necessarily have to commit to one path. You can even do partials of paths, and that'll bring you there. Very good.
Yep, absolutely.
Any questions, Jacob or Will?
Yeah, so the variable player powers are actually like one of my favorite mechanics, if you can call it that, in board games. So what kinds of things is it like, one player board is almost better at military, one is better at commerce or gold and that kind of stuff? Is that the way that it went?
Yeah, so how would I answer that? It's not necessarily that the player boards are better. I guess let me say this first. So there's 10 different characters in the game, but there's really 5 characters, and each character has a basic version and an advanced version.
Oh, okay. I love that too.
Yeah. All right, good to hear. Especially in the real-time game. Like I said, it's not as stressful as other real-time games. You can move at a slower pace, but there still is some time pressure, and I've definitely found that people can struggle to play an advanced character. Right? The advanced character introduces these different interesting powers that mess with some of the basics of the game, and that can be too much for someone in a first-time play to handle, especially in a real-time game. So we split them up. So we said, here's your basics and your advanced. The basic characters, less on the crazy different powers. A lot of the basic powers are different. You just have different tracks to guide you in different directions, but the powers are basically the same. The advanced characters are where you get more of the creative rule-breaking stuff. This person doesn't get any military, but they're able to conquer a province through this special power. And this person never needs, they don't even produce the power victory point. They get tons of votes, but they need votes that they convert into other things to get victory points. So the advanced characters is where I got to like play around more as a designer, which I think I'm aligned with you, Jacob, that I find that inly fascinating and fun to sort of have a character, set the rules and then have a character that breaks the rules. Feels like, really gives you this unique identity. Feel like you're playing a really different version of the game with each character. Of course, that stuff is very hard to balance. So it took a lot of work to make sure we were getting those level, and we couldn't go too hog wild with some of the powers. But hopefully it provides, a really interesting level of replayability for the game.
So they're actually like really significant in how they're different then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Will,
yeah.
do you want to ring in it?
Well, no. Well, how early in the development did the theme start to become interwoven, or was that there from the beginning?
So there's very early on there was this little core piece, the very simple core piece of the theme, which was that when I thought I was going to make this game in real time, I was like, well, so what should it be? Initially you think real time, should it be like your I Love Lucy in a bakery with pies coming and fastly trying to like get them filled out, because it's real time, right? So it should have time pressure. And you see a lot of other games are like that, it's like you're under attack, enemies are coming, 60 seconds, do this, do that. Which totally fits with that feel. But again, like I mentioned, while this game is quote unquote real time, it feels very different. And I wanted to make sure the theme emphasized that. So I quickly went away from any kind of speed under the gun theme, and I gravitated towards this idea of this more sort of epic sweeping timeline. So that's where I came to this sort of medieval setting where you're trying to become the emperor. That means you're putting plans in motion that take months or years to develop. You shouldn't think of this as a speed round. It's more, you only have so much to focus on and time to do stuff, but it's a matter of playing the long game. And so I initially had actually come up with this sort of fantasy world, and it was just sort of a vague background. I didn't really flesh it out too much. I just sort of had this idea, this generic fantasy world that I was going to kind of come up with. Was more focused on the kind of crazy mechanics I was trying to sort out first. Then as I really got down to wanting to pitch it, I was like, well, fantasy worlds are cool and all. I enjoy fantasy settings, but surely a board game publisher doesn't want me to come and be like, oh, I got this cool fantasy world I made up. It's great. Mm-hmm. They'll be like, yeah, everyone has the cool fantasy world from their D&D game from high school that they think is great or whatever. So I flipped it over to be a Roman theme. And so you were in ancient Rome, kind of
because Mediterranean is an underused theme. So I'm glad that you left that fantasy and went right there.
Yeah. So it was pretty generic. Well, I thought I was being wild enough with the mechanics of the timers that I was like, maybe I'll keep the theme a little more predictable. So I did ancient Rome, took it to Stonemaier, pitched it, we got it signed. Like his second email to me was, are you really tied to the Roman theme? I was thinking of like making up a fantasy world for it. I was like, really?
Wow. Okay. So how long were you pitching the game before it got signed?
What's that?
How long were you pitching the game before it got signed?
It was how was I pitching it? Well, I was working on it for 2.5 years. It was only really ready to start getting pitched. It would only been like 2 or 3 months before I pitched to Stonemaier. So he was actually the first person that I pitched it to, really. I was sort of getting it ready to pitch and did some work around that, but he was actually the first one that I approached to pitch.
That's killer.
So it's really, I mean, I was really excited to he was one of the top publishers that I wanted to sign.
Yeah,
with. I mean,
absolutely.
Great quality.
He has like the golden touch, the Midas touch, man. You're already like #1 on the hot list on B.
It's true.
That's crazy.
It's true, and I credit Stonemaier for that, since no one knows about the game yet.
Right. After it came to you, after you brought it to Stonemaier, and I know there's two people there. How much did it evolve from when you brought it to where it is now?
Yeah, there was a lot that evolved. I mean, the core of the game didn't change necessarily. I mean, when I brought it to him, it was a shared game board with 2 rows action spaces. With like a lot of the core was the same. There was a lot of refining around the edges that were still a little rough. I mean, it was great to leverage his blind playtest network. Because again, with the real time, there's lots of things that are hard to see what is easy for people to forget or to overlook. And with me being at every playtest, I remind people, I tried not to, but point this out or help them with this rule. So once we got in the blind playtest network, we're able to see more things that's like, people are not getting this needs to go, or we need to change that. So there's a lot of refinement that went in. And yeah, Stonemaier, as you may or may not know, is Jamie Stegmaier, who really runs it most of the day-to-day. But his partner, Alan Stone, who's designed games with him in the past as well, is still a part of it. And so I actually went through a development phase with Alan first. Through
it's quite an infrastructure there where they'll develop, and then they have the play tester. So it's really got the whole organization going. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it was a great publisher to work with. Like I said, I mean, from how they design and how they develop to the final quality product that they put out there. To also just the fact, I mean, I was excited because I really thought it would be a good place to do an innovative game like this. I mean, Scythe always blew me away from the first time I saw it and played it. It reminded me of my game a little bit because I remember seeing it at a GameCon and I was like, oh, look at that crazy Ameritrash war game, like map destruction, own the land. And then someone's like, you want to play? And I was like, yeah, sure, let's check it out. And then I was like, wait, this is like a Euro game with resource production and engine building, but it looks like an area map control. This is so cool. It's blowing my mind. Because
that's awesome.
I mean, I play Euro games more, actually. I mean, I enjoy Ameritrash every now and then, but it was such a cool, like, you know, blending of the two in an unexpected way. And I think it made some things that are Ameritrash way more approachable for people, that you can play this war game on a map and not have the downside of what some people don't like about Ameritrash. So that spoke to me.
The
exactly
randomness gone.
Yeah. So that spoke to me exactly of my game of like, because as I mentioned, I thought it was this take on real time, but so different. And it really sort of, hopefully takes away all these rough edges and things that people don't like about real time. And I mean, one of the best pieces of feedback that I've gotten many times on the game, which is exactly what I was looking for when I started, was the number of people who say, I really don't like real time games, but I like your game. And that's kind of what I was going for.
That's quite an endorsement. Will, did you have a question to ask?
I didn't, but I did want to mention the name of the civilization, Dunya. Did you come by that? That's Arabic, right?
I believe it's Turkish, but full disclosure, so I did not come up with the name Dunya. So once we signed and we decided to switch over to a fantasy world, Jamie actually hired an artist to sort of do some world building, both with the backstory of the world as well, of course, all of the art to build it out. So that was Robert Leask, who is a phenomenal artist. If you check out his stuff online, I mean, and I mean, the stuff in the game I love too, but all of his other work, I mean, it's great. And I was thrilled to work with him. Not that I knew anything before. I don't think he'd ever done a board game before this, but he was really talented.
Did you have a lot of say in the art?
With the name for the world.
Did you have a lot of say in the art?
I chatted with Jamie some on some of the general direction and tone, and it kind of went in with the theme that I talked about before of this should be sweeping empire, view. Not sort of like everything should be some fast little battle scene or something like that. It should be this more kind of sweeping, grand feel from the art that really.
From what I've seen, you accomplished it, definitely.
Oh, I think so. I mean, that was just my vague input. I mean, Jamie did a lot more of the detailed work with the artist. I honestly don't have much of an eye for art. I mean, I love what came out, but it's not my strong suit.
Yeah, you can't be a jack of all trades. Now, listen, we're running up against our limit here, our self-imposed limit for interviews. I do want to ask what has influenced you growing up to games, and maybe what influenced the design of this game in particular. But before we get to that question, Jacob, do you have any more questions? And Will after Jacob.
I think now I'm curious as to hear what's going to happen with the next question. Like what got you into gaming and all that kind of stuff.
Me too.
Yeah, sure.
Well, there it is.
Yeah. So I did, all kinds of gaming in general growing up. I played D&D and Risk and all sorts of things. But weirdly, I never played the sort of like, Euro new kind of board games. And it wasn't until later in life, in my like late 20s, I guess, almost early 30s, that finally someone showed me one of these games. And I was like, how am I not into this?
Same for me. I got into it late.
Immediately got into the community and started playing games all the time and got swept in. I mean, so most of what I played coming in the hobby, which was probably 10 years or so, a little over 10 years ago. All the classic big Euro games Agricola, Macau, Gates of Loyang, Power Grid, all that great stuff, crunchy games. Right. I've always enjoyed. I enjoy games of all different weights, but that was a lot of what got me into gaming.
Of those touchstones, do you think any of those, maybe without you realizing it, did influence the path that Pendulum has gone down?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the real-time piece of it, and again, the way it sort of uses the timers to in a creative way to create this kind of flow, I think is really unique, and I don't really know what I would attribute it to. It was just kind of this weird bolt out of the blue inspiration. I hadn't played much of any real-time board games before that.
Just so the big old stew.
Yeah, it really. So that just was sort of like the little seed out of nowhere, which I don't know, that brought it all up. But everything else around the game, you can totally see my influences: worker placement, engine building, tuck a card, multi-use card that can expand your engine. I mean, all that came from all those kind of worker placement games that I mentioned: Lagrangia, Agricola, Trajan. You know. Trajan's not really worker placement, but
no, but it's great. Well, okay, listen, thank you so much. That was wonderful. Definitely got some insights for me. Sorry for the hard end on the thing. I did want to get to a bunch of personal questions. I did have just questions about you. I had word associations. I do like to have all my interviews end with a joke. Travis, could you read us a joke?
All right. Am I supposed to say where the joke came from?
I texted it to him.
Okay. All right. They say don't go grocery shopping while you're hungry, but it's been a week and I keep getting hungrier.
Okay, well.
Just so you know, this man has recently become a dad. Not that that has ever stopped him from saying dad jokes, but that is the case.
Yep.
Okay, well, everyone, thank you, Jacob, thank you, Will, and definitely thank you, Travis, so much. Best of luck with that. I think it's already going to be gangbusters, I know, man. And I hope we get to talk in the future very soon.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, guys.
Yeah, it was really cool. So, okay, and for everyone watching, okay, folks, that is the show. Thank you for joining us. Please make sure to subscribe, like, and share our show so we can grow. If you have suggestions on guests, let us know. We'd love to hear it. Until next time, be safe, be well, and we'll see you then. Thank you so much.